So I hope you can understand now when I said to you I kind of met Mark and I hadn't heard him actually speak, but I'd met him and felt his energy. I hope you can feel the same thing about when you meet people and you just instinctively, you follow your intuition and say, this is somebody I want to work with and there's things we need to do. And my job in what I do, which was really born out of The Guardian, is I look to people like Mark, that I think there's a lot of great non-profits in the world that do great work and they don't need our help. There's a lot of great people who are both non-profits and doing great stuff and do need our help. And the help isn't coming from government, and it's not always coming from foundations and private investment. It needs to come from corporations, and that needs to be sustainable. And it needs to be enduring. So what we do as FairShare is effectively we do that. We go out, we believe that there's a significant number of companies in the world that at the board level want to do more good, but the execution is poor. The purpose economy is young, and the execution is still too poor. Too much is done in retrofitting case studies and corporate comms, and we try and find leaders of corporations who have a much more invested purpose in doing good, and we help them execute better. So when I listen to people like Mark, my next part of that job is I go and I have to think about how do we actually 10x what he's doing? How do we take PAL and do something significant with it? And you know, I often start the other way round, but in this instance we're thinking, as FairShare, what do we do? We're not a charity, we're not a non-profit. We have to make a living out of what we do. We find people like Mark Brand that that really align with what we're passionate about ourselves. And we have to find clients like DOMO and say, where is that authentic magic? And when you multiply these things, what does it equal? What does it come to? And it's exponentially growing. And so I often start the other way round. What we tend to do, and DOMO's, this is the perfect case study for our business, what we do, is I go to DOMO and it's pretty much a blank canvas. It's a young company, it's a tech unicorn in Utah, it's got 800 engineers, and you start with a place, and I've got a leader of that company in Shane, who says, we don't know exactly what we want to do, but we want to do good. And it needs to be relevant to what we do, and it needs to have scale and opportunity for what we want to do. And so we look at DOMO and we look at partners, and sorry, Amy, for the logo, I'm using a dreadful old logo, but we look at how we draw our inspiration. We've had conversations with Zach at the back about St. Bernard project. There's people in this room that we've done stuff with and will evolve. But we look at partners like that. Parity.org, DOMO is already invested in. They have been out of the gate. But most importantly, when we look at Mark's work, we look, how do we bring this work, first of all, to be relevant, having seen how much stuff is just marketing veneer, how do we bring this stuff with meaning into the company? So for us, when we look at the relationship with Mark and what he's doing around homelessness, I work with Shane and we work with the leadership from the CEO down, from the stakeholders in the business, the community groups and the employees to say, if we work on this project to address homelessness and put our engineers to work, how does it really drive, how can we really embed that in the business? And it really is deeply embedded from the CEO down, and Shane can show some examples of that. And only once we've done that and we've seen that this is a truly authentic relationship with mileage, we can then take that out to the media and we can tell bigger stories. When we started this relationship, we didn't have a lot of stories to tell in the media because it was like, so what kind of story? Corporation working with Mark, not a big known entity in the US. But actually, as it grows, when we go to the Greasy Spoon and we look at what we're doing now, I'd say it's the first project I've worked on where we got more media interested in what we're doing than we know what we want to do with, whether that's working with Apple, Samsung and all the content they deliver, T-Mobile, we've got Turner we're talking to and a whole host of others, now this and the Group 9. And so now we actually start to be able to tell a story, not as a corporation like Shane with a marketing budget, but telling a story through, the DOMO story lives right through the environment of what Mark's doing, and that's much more authentic. So I want to get into it. I want you guys to hear a bit from Shane as well, because I think it's important that the key of how we do this going forward is having what I like to call corporate moles. And Shane is a classic example of a C-suite mole, and we'll talk a bit more about what those are. But can you just start by giving Shane people what's the sort of the sort of 2-second or 2-minute sell on what DOMO actually does?
Thanks, Eamonn. Yeah, I mean, I think Amy said it. We do really hard things with data to make people that aren't analysts empowered to use data to do things in their job, to do things to make the world a better place. You know, data is, I think, in most cases, held by less than 1% of the company. It's held by an analyst. It's held by finance. It's held by the board. Yet everybody else who needs the data, they get it late. They get it packaged in a PowerPoint, and it doesn't really help them. So the irony of big data is that you don't need big data. You need small data in the right time.
And in your, you're going to say something?
Yeah, totally. I mean, usually, if you still got a microphone. So one of the things I didn't get to mention is exactly that, why I can be on the road and do what I do is because I actually have DOMO on my phone. And so as a restaurateur, what happens is we get our quarterly report, and then I'm mad, right? That's just all. I'm like, costs are too high, labor's too high, everybody's an idiot, right? And it's nobody's fault. So what happens now is we have daily inventory, we have daily reporting of labor, we have every single cost up to the second, updates and refreshes as soon as I open my thing. So I can come in here this morning not worrying about what those reports are going to look like. I've already seen them. I saw them this morning. I saw them for our businesses this morning. I know what's going on. So there's no tension, and it sort of relieves you because I'm operating off the exact same data that my chef is. So our relationship is whole. My GM has the same data I do. We're all in really good shape, and we're also attacking the same issues live. So it's crazy. That's what else they brought to the relationship was like, let's get all your businesses online so you can spend more time focusing on the big picture and not worried about the nuance of what celery's costing today, even though I'm still worried about it. At least I know what it is. So, sorry.
And a key, I mean, it is interesting, the two parts of that, which we didn't, I know, explain earlier, but it's not just about obviously bringing the issues to life through the DOMO platform that you have on your phone, you have, I have, and many people have that can demonstrate the value of what it does on the homeless initiative, but it makes you more efficient at running your business because you're on the road, 200 days a year? 300 days a year. And so a critical part of that is back on the commercial side is understanding what the motivation is of the company and the individual, because that's what makes these relationships valuable and true, and therefore enduring. So how are you personally invested in this, Shane? Because that's kind of a key thing that I always look for is like the difference between a corporate opportunity and someone who actually gives a shit.
Yeah, I've never been so proud to be called a mole before. Yeah, I'm a self-made person. I grew up at the corner of Idaho, Washington State, and Canada. I like to say my parents were hippies, but they were also super poor. So we didn't have running water. We lived on a cabin in the woods until I was 14 years old. I graduated from the University of Washington in 1995, and I had the classic outlier 10,000 hour reality, which is the internet started my senior year. I said, that sure seems like it's going to change the world, and jumped right in. And I had a vision when I was in high school and college to get back to the world, and then I got deep into the internet, and 15 years passed of my life. The point you make, Mark, about spending the weekends giving back. I'm already giving 100 hours a week to work, and so why would I borrow from my personal time with my family versus from work? Is kind of where my head is at to give back. And if I can use leverage, which in tech we talk about all the time, right? 10x, moonshots. If I can use leverage with being a mole by redirecting some of the money that we're wasting chasing people around the internet with banner ads that they don't like to click on anyway, and have people like you, do things to make the world a better place and help tell our story, it's a new form of advertising, and I think it's a more appropriate form of advertising. So for me, the dots connect as far as my personal connection to cause and commerce is, I think, as clear as day that shouldn't be the outlier. That should be what we all do every day.
Yeah, and you've been through on your own journey, you've been through pretty much 3 different kind of very different cycles of your own career. You've been a founder. Obviously, you're Seattle-based, right? So you've lived in a city that's got quite deep issues and yet great wealth. But you've been a founder. You've been in the WPP world, for people who know that world, which is about corporate politics, and values is not that high on the agenda, as you were seeing in the news recently. And now you're in this kind of very different world of tech and pre-IPO and post-IPO. How do those different worlds collide? What does it mean for you now when you join? How did it feel when you joined DOMO?
Yeah, if I go back to starting a company, I've started 2 digital agencies. Our business plan, the first page says we will win or die by our culture, and of how we treat each other and how we treat the world and how we treat our partners. And that was core from the beginning, and that's how we hired people, and that's how we spoke to each other. When we sold our agency, this big holding company with 200,000 employees, you were the first person I could find that would have a conversation about culture and how that matters to the performance of the company. So finding pirates like yourself and being able to say, yes, these things are fucked up, let's find better ways to be authentic and do what's right was really key. I think coming to a tech company, you mentioned the word a canvas or a blank canvas. That's the beautiful part about what I've walked into is the bad news is nobody tried to do anything to give back really before I came into DOMO. We raised $1 billion, hired 800 engineers, and did a bunch of hard things with technology to enable use cases like what Mark shared. So the bar was really low to say let's give back, and I would say our CEO was fairly dubious from the beginning about these really wanted the combination of commerce and good. And the first time you spoke in front of our company was at our sales kickoff meeting where we had this was like out of a classic movie where we've got 400 sales guys from all over the world wearing their suits and rallying to talk about growing this technology company. And Mark stood up and told his story, similar to what you just did, a few minutes ago. And the CEO leaned over to me. We're at the center table. There's 400 people behind us. We're in Utah. His wife's there at the table and our exec team. And he said, "How much longer is this guy going to talk? I want to get up there and tell my story and rally the sales troops." And I literally put my hand on the CEO's knee, and he's a friend of mine for 20 years. And I said, "Chill out and just trust me." And I looked up, and on the other side of him is his wife, and she caught my eye, and I caught her eye, and I nodded at her, and she looked at him, and she said, "Trust him." And then within 5 minutes, he chilled out, listening to you, he chilled out, and an hour later, what happened?
So you know how you can sense anxiety in a room for any of you like sat in front of it? I'd never met the CEO at this point aside from a handshake. And just to give you a little bit of background, we were in an event space that everything went wrong. Everything went wrong for dinner. Like literally everything that could go wrong went wrong. And we pulled it off. And then at the last minute, I got up to speak. And I'm literally pouring sweat. Like I've come out of the kitchen. I got my whites on. They're dirty. I'm trying to strip them off to look presentable. I just launched into my story. I'm like, I'll just speak my truth and it'll be good. And I look down and the CEO is doing this. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay, I'm doing a terrible job. So I just kept going. And at the end of it, I stepped off stage and Shane intercepted me and he was like, "That was really great. Thank you. We're going to do something for you next week." I was like, "Cool, what?" He's like, it's a surprise. It's a surprise. We'll tell you next week. I was like, "You guys already do so much." He's like, "No, we'll tell you next week." And Josh essentially beckons me, who's the CEO, and I walk over. I'm like, "Hey, man, thanks. I had a really nice night." He's like, "Hey, did Shane tell you what we're going to do for you?" I was like, "No, he didn't." He's like, "Oh, we're giving you 50 grand. I was like, "Holy shit, what?" And I immediately did the math, and I was like, "That's like 18,000 people will get fed." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." To me, that's a tremendous amount of money. It's huge. And these guys, because of the story, he turned, and that was a personal donation. So it was super impactful.
So that was a baby step, with all due respect, to transforming a CEO's mindset from, he gives money personally, but nothing really from the company side, to say, well, there's something there. And then a couple weeks later, we had a company meeting, and we shared the early part of the story of DOMO helping Mark's organization, and you shot a selfie video that we showed in a movie theater in some strip mall in Utah to our whole staff of 950 people, and I remember one of our consultants who's never spoke publicly in her life, who jumped right in and volunteered to work on your initiative. I think is her name Andrea? Andrea, very, very shy person. And she asked me the morning of the company meeting, she said, "Do you mind, is it okay if I bring note cards? Because I never spoke before in public." And I almost started crying because I was like, "You're prepared. That's better than most people. You care. That's amazing. That's what I want." And she, she was trembling when she spoke about what she had done personally with her time, nights and weekends in the first couple weeks to help Mark's organization. The audience of engineers who are super dry and don't talk in company meetings erupted of cheers and clapter for her and for what we are doing with Mark and his organization. So we unlocked, that was a moment where I was like, wow, we've unlocked this want, this desire to give that the employees wanted deeply, authentically, but they had no forum to do it. And it was really Eamonn, you connecting the dots, and marrying us up to make that happen. And then, that has built. We had a dinner where we brought our best customers and partners and prospects to a dinner in Salt Lake. We had Mark cook the dinner, and we didn't really tell anybody who Mark was. And over the courses, Mark told 5-minute vignettes of his life story and what you're doing to make the world a better place. And you had us laughing, you had us in tears, you had us getting to know each other over the course of a 2-hour meal, and you served it family style. And what happened in this collision that was by accident at the end of the night is 2 of our customers said, "Well, we have a bunch of people trained on your platform, Shane. Why don't we volunteer their time to help Mark's organization?" And I almost started crying that moment because I thought, wow, this is awesome. I get to be Eamonn in that situation. I get to connect some dots, and new things are happening. And so then the CEO, I told him that story, and he said, "All right, this fall we're going to create a marketplace, and we branded it DOMO for Good. We're going to give our product for free, and we're going to essentially do a digital marketplace to match up nonprofits and people who know our product to be able to volunteer their time to consult to help the nonprofits." So the 10x is happening both within within what you're doing, Eamonn, or Mark, but also what we're able to do with other nonprofits. We've had 2 other nonprofits sign up here in the last couple of weeks to be able to grow even more.
But also, I think it's important to talking about the blank canvas at DOMO. These are great stories, and they meant a lot at the time. We also know people are fickle, right? What was really important to them one day, you're in a boardroom and the agenda is different. Like, you joined DOMO and there were, I think, 300 marketing events you were doing a year, most of which was around golf, skiing, expensive dinners. So how do you go about changing that? Because you call it corporate bribery, right? You call it just like buying business, taking people out for these great events, and here we are talking about something very different. Like, how do you think about that migration?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to test and learn. I think you got to try new things. I worked back from a spreadsheet, and I looked at our budgets that I inherited. We had $15,000 that had been allocated for urinal pucks to have our logo on them for conferences. And I literally, I couldn't even believe it. And then there was another line item for stir sticks with our logo on the stir sticks, and that was another $20,000. And I thought, what? So it's $35,000 that, that was very easy for me to be like, well, those 2 are killed. Eamonn, let's try $35,000 spent to try a couple of things with Mark. And I didn't even have to ask permission because I wasn't asking for a new budget. I was just looking at some simple waste, and then that built over time. But the doubters still happen every day. There's ups and downs as far as kind of our journey of tying commerce and good. And even me being here today, the CEO was like, I don't know if that's worth the day of your time. And I said, I didn't ask you to be here. I'm going, and and here's a couple of things we're going to do, and there's a bunch I don't know. I don't know all of you yet. Hope to meet you today and get to know you, and I bet you there's 2 or 3 things we'll come up with. Zach, we finally had a conversation I want to have with you there you are for 3 months last night, and already there's 2 ideas there on the table. So the universe does give back if you put yourself out there.
And I want to just build on that, because as we think about what DOMO for Good looks like I don't want this to be like just a love fest, but there's challenges even in relationships that are tight, and you guys are as tight as it gets, I think, in terms of corporate and cause. But what are the pros and cons along the way, Mark? You start in this place of like, wow, I mean, it was amazing. 48 hours, what you've been looking for like years, just turns up, right? But then there's a very interesting, I think of them as like a highway, cars traveling at different speeds, but you are like 100 miles an hour every day, like hustling. It's just who you are, right? It's what you do. Shane, you're at 100 miles an hour in your own head, as the C-suite, C-level mole of balancing like purpose and profit. But you've got all this politics to manage as well. Companies change, leaderships change, agendas change. How do you keep the continuity of that relationship? Because I think the most common thing we see in these relationships is they're really passionate for like a few months and then they die off because the new shiny thing comes along.
Sure. I think that the first thing I want to say is we run a couple of organizations that are networks that we're all part of too. We're a bunch of people who are trying to do good get together, and how we set the tone for that is lip service is a disservice. If you're not going to do anything, just shut up. Like, you're not doing anybody any favors by being like, love your cause, can't wait to help you, and then not. So the way these relationships do work is trust, and it's real trust. Right? It's like, I believe that I know what you are going through and where your organization is at, and then that can change. Having realistic expectations and understanding what corporate culture actually is as a social impact entrepreneur is as much my responsibility as it is the organization's responsibility. So I need to be realistic about what we do, and we keep doing great things. So as people get excited, you're like, yeah, that's great. And then we start to put things into action. But it has to service both sides as well. What often happens is like, oh, you're the poor entity doing the thing, and we're going to do some stuff. No, there's a mutually beneficial relationship that'll keep the relationship going. And so you have to think that way as the person on the other side is like, how can I benefit DOMO? This way. Andrea, that's how I can benefit DOMO. Creed, the people who are the programmers, the people who don't get the 400-person dinner, those folks who are the real like heroes of helping me out. That's how I help. So that's real relationships, and investing real time and understanding the organization that you're going to work with is integral. You have to know it.
Yeah, I think the road trip test is in my mind constantly with partners. Do we want to be on a road trip together? Will we enjoy each other? Will we get into a flow together? And that definitely checks the boxes, and then some with you and I, Mark. I think the other piece is, and this, as far as what we're learning is, you're a hustler in all the best ways, right? You don't even follow the rules that don't make sense. You just blast right past them. And in my mind, as a CMO, my job is to reduce friction and get you connected to the product people and the technology people without the formalities that are normally in business of like the Word document and the PowerPoint that blocks a lot of stuff. So there's moments where, I by design, we're like, set Mark free to go talk to our people. There's no budget, there's no timeline. Go craft an idea, go inspire an idea, and the more you're on the front lines with our people, you're going to have better ideas than probably what you and I would do alone. There's other times where I'm like, okay, we got to reel back a little bit and formalize the commitments so that we follow through with the actions that we've said, that budget is aligned, that we don't get distracted with 5 other things that are going on that have nothing to do with what we're doing with you. And so there's times for me to intervene, there's times for me to get out of the way. And usually when we get it right, it works well, and there's other times where I'm like, oh, we're letting you go too far, or we're not helping you enough with the politics or with the budgeting or the timelines.
I can't believe we've used up an hour already. I'm going to finish on 2 things, because I think there's two important things going forward for us and this partnership that also you can talk about over the next 2 days with these guys. One is it's been a really interesting journey of balancing purpose with profit and how we go forward. We were talking with Zach just last night about the importance within a fast-growing company, a commercial company like DOMO, is how you build DOMO for good, or whatever it is you do for good, but you keep it in balance so that it doesn't start to become, we used to talk about kids chasing soccer balls where you're just running around chasing the new thing, but you can keep the momentum of the business running, but offer a product or a service that can help people help themselves, whether it's profit or non-profit. And the other thing is, as FairShare we think about a lot is when you look at this relationship, we don't think about it as who's writing a check or dedicating resource, but we think of it like seed funding. And DOMO has been with Mark right out of the gate on this project. And when we go into things like the Greasy Spoon Tour and we take it to 20 cities and we have 6,000 people dining with us and we take it to a 5 million social audience that then takes it to a 50 million media audience, in DOMO's world, if we were on the traditional sponsorship route, typically whether you're a team or a business, you're the best friend of that sponsor until the bigger one comes along, right? And then you switch to the bigger one, and you're best friend of them until the bigger one. And the depth of the relationship that in this example DOMO has with Mark is when we go to something like Greasy Spoon Tour and people like Unilever or big players get involved, is there's a value, the profit has to be on both sides, and there's a value to DOMO because it's been there out of the gate. It will be with us right through that journey, regardless of what the budget requires. And so we think about that as the return on the investment, right? It's not just about good for your people and motivating for your staff. It allows you to tell a DOMO story to your audience of customers and the trade. But actually now we're going to take that story to a much broader American audience, but through the voice of what we do with the Greasy Spoon Tour, and as a partner that gets an exponential value because you were there right out of day one with us and you'll stay with us, and we appreciate that. So thanks everyone. We're 4 minutes over, not too bad. Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much.